Welcome to the fourth episode of my series, Madden Training 101, where we'll take an in-depth look at various mechanics, features, and improvements to gameplay and examine how closely they reflect the game of football. Last week, we took a look at how linebackers act as force defenders in various defensive schemes, and today we'll examine how players in the secondary act as force defenders. Now, just a little reminder before we dig into the footage, but the force defender is simply the player responsible for preventing the ball carrier from escaping the perimeter. Who plays force is not assigned to any one player. Rather, who the force defender is dependent upon the coverage, the front, and the direction of the play. Now remember, to actually force the ball carrier inside, it is essential that the force defender attack the line of scrimmage as close to a 45-degree angle as possible to shrink the alley. He must also engage the blocker with his outside shoulder free to maintain outside leverage in case the ball carrier attempts to get to the outside. And again, last week we determined that linebackers possessed adequate AI that allowed them to at least attempt to exhibit proper force behavior. And now, with that in mind, let's dive headfirst right into the footage and see if the safeties and the corners play force in a similar fashion. In this play, the Seahawks come out in I formation, 21 personnel, and they run a stretch to the play side, while the Lions run a 4-3 cover 3 sky coverage. In this case, the strong safety here is playing a curl flat zone, but is also responsible for forcing the ball carrier inside if the play goes his direction. So the ball is snapped and the stretch does go play side, but the strong safety is late reading the tackle's down block. He simply stands there with his shoulders squared and is late to attack the line of scrimmage. He gets no penetration and finally engages at a near standstill with a rumbling fullback coming right at him. However, the safety does engage with his outside arm free, but ultimately his inability to penetrate at the snap gives him little outside leverage. And by the time the strong safety disengages from his block, it's too late to force running back Marshawn Lynch inside. Instead, he gets to the sideline for a gain of 8. Now, let's look at the same play, where we'll key in on the strong safety who's playing force. And once again, he stands with his shoulders squared for a moment, almost waiting for the big fullback to come at him. Now, he's not completely at a standstill once he engages with the fullback, which is worth mentioning because in years prior, safeties playing force would simply wait to be blocked. But here, the safety doesn't attack downhill. He meets a fullback in full stride, not a great scenario for the defense. The safety does nothing to squeeze the lane for Lynch. Not only that, but this time, he engages head-on with the fullback with little outside leverage. At the very least, it seems as though he's at least trying to position himself outside of the fullback, but at this point, his efforts are futile, and again, Lynch is able to get to the outside for a nice gain. Alright, I've got one last play here. This time, we'll be taking a look at force defenders in a 4-3 cover 2 scheme. Now in cover 2, since the safeties have deep zone responsibilities, they're thinking pass first. Instead, the corners are responsible for outside runs. And believe it or not, they actually key in on the end man of the line of scrimmage, also known as the emals, to get their run pass read. So in this play, which is another stretch play out of the I formation to the strong side, it's the strong side corner who is responsible for turning any outside runs back to the inside. So the ball is snapped, and the corner reads the tight end's down block extremely late, and the wide receiver is then able to press a stationary corner. In this case, the corner, once reading the emal's down block, should immediately attack into the backfield at as close to a 45-degree angle as possible to squeeze the alley and force Lynch inside. The corner has enough cushion to avoid being blocked by the receiver altogether, and absolutely cannot wait to be blocked by the wide receiver. Even worse though is his inability to keep his outside arm free while engaged in the block, and without any sort of outside leverage, Marshawn Lynch gets to the outside for a gain of 7. Okay, so that's all the footage I have for you this week. While we discovered last week that linebackers do a decent job of attempting to force ball carriers inside on outside run plays, safeties and cornerbacks simply lack the appropriate AI necessary to exhibit adequate force behavior. In future years, corners and safeties, and especially safeties, must identify runs quicker and then appropriately attack downhill with their outside shoulder free instead of simply waiting to be blocked. But for now, let's analyze the implications that poor secondary force behavior exerts on your defensive schemes when playing Madden NFL 15. With safeties unable to provide much help on outside runs, The effectiveness of bringing a safety down into the box to assist with run defense is severely reduced. And in schemes that allow for a safety to abandon his pass-first responsibility, i.e. in cover 1 or cover 3, you're essentially sacrificing an extra pass defender at the expense of incorporating an extra yet useless pawn in the hopes of allocating additional support for your run defense. Alright, now it's time for my shameless self-promotion segment. If you haven't yet, make sure you check out part 1 of this Force Defender mini-series. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't hesitate to check out episodes 1 and 2 at the bottom of your screen, where I take an in-depth look at the wide 9 technique and 2-gap defenders, respectively. Also, being an aspiring video game journalist, I'd love for you to check out my in-depth review of Madden NFL 15 and provide feedback. Finally, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe for weekly gaming content. Stay tuned for next week's episode, and until then, take care, and I'm out.